Hey guys, ET Insider from SunBros, and it's time for another how to build video, and this is the one that you've all been waiting for, the Omen how to build video, and I'm really excited about this one. But before we get started, as always guys, remember, if you guys enjoy the content, please give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and of course check out our other how to build videos, our top 5 videos, and our Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday night live streams. Alright guys, and as always, we're going to get started with the hero page, taking a look at what makes Omen who he is, what makes him tick, and trying to maximize those strengths while also masking the weaknesses. We're going to start with his passive Thirst. Every time Omen hits an enemy with a normal attack, he gains 1 Thirst point. After reaching 5 points, Omen increases his movement speed by 60 and his attack speed by 25% for 5 seconds. His strength and normal attacks will also deal true damage, reducing the cooldown for his first ability and his second ability, Death Beacon and Untouchable, by 1 second. So we get that awesome cooldown reduction when he's in his passive, going bananas. And of course, I can confirm that the true damage goes from 60 to 228 at level 15. The second part of his passive is Omen's third normal attack triggers a second hit that deals 50% damage, and also the counter is reset after reaching 5 points of Thirst and after coming out of Thirst. So that is actually an important piece of the second part, is an important piece of his passive, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Omen's first ability is Death Beacon. I'm an idiot. Omen uses his blade to pull an enemy in front of him closer. Pull all enemies in front of him closer, dealing damage and slowing their movement speed, starting at 25% going all the way up to 50%. Alright, second ability is Untouchable. Omen enters a state of heightened awareness and gains a bunch of damage reduction, starting at 50% and going up all the way to 70% at level 6, while increasing his movement speed by 25% for 2 seconds. The movement speed also goes up to 40%. In this state, Omen can reflect normal attacks, dealing physical damage to the attacker, decreasing the movement speed, and adding any bonus normal attack effects to Omen's equipped items or buffs. Each attacker can only have their attacks reflected once. So the reflection that happens one time adds the buffs or the passives from the items, which is something to consider. So items with good passives, for example, Fafnir's Talon, is going to be something we're going to focus on because the reflection can do it. And I have to double check by doing some testing, but I'm pretty sure that the second part of Omen's passive, the second hit, can also apply some of those on-hit effects also. And next we're going to be talking about his ultimate, Death's Embrace. Omen rushes forward, dealing a bunch of damage to the first enemy he runs into. He then summons a plasma sword that curses the target for 5 seconds. While cursed, the target deals less damage with attacks and cannot leave the sword's area. So that's a second form of damage reduction that we have. I want to point out the cooldown starts at 40 and goes to 30 at level 3. So that's a second form of damage reduction that we have. Additionally, what I think is interesting and that should be noted is that the 5 seconds of being crowd controlled by the Death's Embrace ability with the sword, it cannot be undone by anything, including Purify, Shagnar's ultimate, or any of the other crowd control breaking abilities in the game. Excuse me. So let's go ahead and go to the equipment page, and we're going to get started building him. Now, one of the really interesting things about Omen is how incredibly diverse his toolkit actually is. And because of that, I have found that there's really 2 ways of building him, and that's tanky and damagey. So we're going to build, I'm going to show you a build for both of those ways, but we're going to build him as is a tank. And I actually think he makes a really fine jungler, so I'm going to build him in a jungle fashion. And obviously if you guys want to change that up, you can, but I'm going to build him a tank jungler right here, and then we're going to show you a damage build that works really well also. The first item that we're going to go with, our jungle item, is of course going to be Leviathan. It is great because it gives them a semblance of tankiness. We have the HP, we have the HP that builds up, and of course we have the passive that is going to give damage. Now, part of his toolkit, a major part of his toolkit, is actually staying really close to the enemy heroes he's fighting. I mean, he has one that pulls them in. He has to do damage really close up to be taking advantage of that incredible passive, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. And his ultimate obviously keeps that enemy within a certain very small perimeter for 5 seconds. So we're going to really utilize that burn to our advantage to be doing as much damage as we can while being tanky and just being nearby. The second item we're going to go with is going to be the boots, of course. Gilded Greaves. We want to stick close to those enemies. We want to be able to not get crowd control. I totally fell off topic there. 35% resistance, as always, is going to be really key. If you're stunned, slowed, crowd controlled in any fashion for 1 second, for example, the 35% resistance will reduce it by 35% to 0.65 seconds. Next, we're going to be going to another tank item, and we're going to go with the famous Leviathan Mantle of Raw combination. It's pretty simple. You get 80 attack damage. It's going to help his overall damage. You get armor, going to help his tankiness a little bit. But you get the burn again. You're going to double burn with Leviathan and Mantle of Ra, while forcing everything about his kit is about being close to somebody. And I can tell you, I've tested it out. This actually does a pretty incredible amount of damage, and I'm really looking forward to it. Then we're going to be getting our first damage item, because we're not going full tank. We're going to be building an off-tank warrior build. Then we're going to be knocking out our first damage item, which is going to be Fafnir's. Attack damage, attack speed, lifesteal, which is nice to have, especially when you're doing the damage reduction pieces. When you're using his second ability for damage reduction, you have his ult going on for damage reduction. Being able to just see a little bit of that life back is actually pretty nice. But really what we're focusing on here is the passive, which works incredibly with Omen's kit. Normal attacks deal additional damage equal to 8% of the target's current HP. And that's going to obviously work on all his auto attacks, and it's going to be crazy good during his passive when he's going crazy doing true damage. Now he's going to be dealing the extra damage from Fafnir's, and the attack speed is increased. I mean, it's just exponentially awesome. And then the second part of the passive, the part where every third hit is going to cause a second hit at 50% damage. I haven't tested it yet, but we'll see. Hopefully that actually does the effect of Fafnir's talent again. Also, I apologize for not testing it, just something that popped in my head right before I started recording, and we'll look at it. And then the other thing is the second ability, as it reflects damage, causing the on-hit effects. That works with Fafnir's also. So every time you use the second ability to do the damage reduction and you reflect damage back to an enemy hero, they will take 8% of their target HP off, also on top of the damage you're already going to be causing them from the reflection. So it really just works in a myriad of really good ways with him, so it's too good of an item for him to pass up on. Next, we're going to be going with another tank item, and one that I feel like is super good on him because he already has so much crowd control. This gives him more damage, more cooldown reduction. It gives him armor. It gives him HP, so it's really building his overall tankiness. And of course, it's going to be building the passive, which gives him some damage and another slow. It also builds with the kind of natural cooldown reduction that he has. The 3-second cooldown reduction on Frostcape's passive works really well with the cooldowns that he has. Now, speaking of cooldown reductions, we've so far built into our kit only 10%, which is a little bit less than we'd really want on him with a tanky build. But we're going to be building a little bit more with his last item, and it kind of balances itself out with the way that he deals damage. And his cooldowns aren't really that bad as it is, especially considering his passive reduces the cooldowns of his first and second ability. And last but certainly not least is going to be Spear Longinus. I think this is probably a pretty controversial pick, and I'll tell you why it shouldn't be. Spear Longinus gives him more damage on all its attacks. It gives him 15% more cooldown reduction, which tops him off on this build at 25%. And then it gives him armor, which is just a little bit more tankiness. But really, it's the passive decreasing armor. So the combination that we're really going for on this is it's just doing a bunch of damage through a sequence of events. And what that looks like is we're going to get burned from Leviathan and burned from Mantle of Ra, just from being nearby. We're going to get the true damage from his passive when that's going off. We're going to get Fafnir going off, doing its 8% natural hit on each auto attack, which is going to happen pretty frequently when you're in that passive state and your attack speed's really going. And then we're going to get the extra damage from Frostcape. That's going to happen every 3 seconds on the first normal attack after an ability. And to top that off, Spear Longinus is going to be reducing up to 250 armor, and I actually would beg to differ. This could happen fairly frequently, and the reason why is because, again, this is something that should be going off. This one is definitely going to go off on that third hit from the second part of the passive, right? And it's also going to go off from the reflection damage from the second ability. So you're talking about literally, if you reflect damage and your passive going off, you could get this thing, the Spear Longinus passive, stacked up in the blink of an eye, and then you're doing extra damage just from having 250 less armor to deal with. And I know one of the arguments I'm going to hear about it is that a lot of his damage is true damage, so you don't really need to negate the armor, but I'm telling you, his auto attacks become so much stronger. Then you get the extra damage from the burns on Leviathan and Mantle of Ra, you get the 8% damage from Fafnir's, and you get the extra damage from Frostcape. The combination of all these things put together may not be a big old massive hit, but it's a bunch of really small hits that ends up doing a surprising lot of damage while allowing him to be pretty tanky. So we're building a lot of tank on him, even though he has that really crazy damage reduction abilities with number 2, his second ability, and of course his ultimate, which reduces the damage of the person who's cursed. So this is our tank build. I'm really excited about this one. I've actually played it and I like it a lot. And then our second build is going to be right here. This is the damage build we're going to go with. We're going to go with Soul Reaver for the attack speed, lifesteal, and cooldown reduction. That's going to be pretty key. All the other stuff is fine. You're going to get some attack damage from the stacking mechanism on the jungle items. The Gilded Greaves for the same reason we just discussed. Fafnir's again for the same reason we just discussed again. I think it's just such a good item. Now I want to point out one thing really interesting real quick. Even though lifesteal isn't something that really is super important on him, I think it's interesting that from Soul Reaver, you get 10% cooldown and 10% lifesteal, and then from Fafnir, you get 10% lifesteal, which is really nice to have while building a crazy amount of attack speed. I'm also going to build Spear Longinus to get him a little bit of tankiness, but also I really believe that passive is going to be incredible on him. Once people start figuring that thing can proc in so many different ways at once with him, it's going to be really great. Frost Cape is still in play because I believe that the slow and extra damage is worth it, plus 10% cooldown. So right now we're sitting at 10% cooldown from Soul Reaver, 15 from Spear and Longinus for 25%, and then 35% including Frost Cape, so we're almost maxed out. Gives us a little bit of tankiness, and I think it's just overall a perfect item on Omen. And then last but certainly not least is Blitzblade, which is going to give us another 10% lifesteal, more attack speed. And so we'll talk about that in a second. So we're going to get some attack damage, more attack speed, giving us a total of 90% attack speed on the build. Another lifesteal, another 10% lifesteal, which gives us 30% lifesteal on the build. Which is really good, because if you have somebody ult, let's say you're really low on health, you ult somebody to reduce damage, and then you hit your second ability to reduce the damage from that, and your life stealing, let's say your passive's going off and your life stealing, you could easily heal yourself from really almost dead to 100% in those 2 seconds while you're mitigating that damage. It's actually pretty incredible. And then the passive is really great, because Blitzblade's passive is not something I like. I don't like Blitzblade as an item in general. I think Fafnir's is way better. But after looking into it with this build, I actually like Blitzblade, and the reason why is because the lightning damage is going to be pretty decent. Now I'm getting it for the stats, right? But the passive usually sucks to most people because of the cooldown reduction. But he attacks so quickly when he's in that passive state with all the attack speed we have built up and everything else that the Blitzblade will definitely go off once and could potentially go off twice during one passive moment, because every time you normal attack, you reduce the cooldown 1 second on hit. So you could reduce the cooldown. What Blitzblade normally has an 8-second cooldown, you can attack so fast in his passive with these items that you're actually causing Blitzblade to go off repeatedly. So now, instead of having multiple different channels of damage like we have with the tank build, what we're doing is we are getting a lot of attack speed, a little bit of tankiness. So we're getting extra damage from the reduction in armor from Spear and Longinus. We're getting Fafnir's 8% again. But what we're doing is we're creating, with so much attack speed, we're forcing him to go into his passive way more frequently, which is where the bulk of his damage is going to come anyways. So when you go into his passive, you're going to get some big old fat hits with true damage, with Fafnir's passive going off of the 8% current health, and then Blitzblade will go off at least once, maybe even twice, depending on where you're at in that cooldown. During that, I mean, the damage is going to be insane, and I think this is going to be really well worth it. All right, guys, that is it for our Omen how to build video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know that Omen is by far and away the hardest guy I've had to create builds for. His kit is so unique, and he can be played in such a different amount of ways that it was just really difficult testing and testing and testing to figure out what exactly came out to be the best. But I'm really glad, and I'm super happy with the 2 builds I came up with. I think that they're extremely good on him. And I do want to say I do prefer the tanky build because of the reason that I think he is most effectively played as more of like a warrior off-tank support than he is a full damage guy. His ability to crowd control people is crazy, and what he can do is just amazing. He's a really interesting, unique, and fun hero, and I'm really excited for you guys to try him out. But that is it for this one, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and as always, until next time.